The alarm pierced through the silence, red lights flashing across the concrete walls of ADX Florence. Guards rushed to their stations as a shadow appeared on a surveillance monitor, pacing calmly in the exercise yard where no inmate had been scheduled. The Alcatraz of the Rockies was supposed to be flawless, escape-proof, a machine built to crush hope. Yet here was something that shouldn't exist. Boots pounded the ground as officers stormed the cage, rifles ready. But when the floodlights hit, the yard was empty. The figure was gone. Cameras confirmed it was there. Guards asked who or what was inside. ADX Florence was never like other prisons. Built in 1994 in the remote desert of Colorado, it was designed for the most dangerous men alive. Terrorists, cartel leaders, gang bosses, and killers whose names made headlines. Layers of razor wire surrounded reinforced concrete walls. Gun towers overlooked every angle. Motion detectors, pressure pads, and cameras tracked every movement. Even the smallest detail of an inmate's routine was controlled. When they ate, when they exercised, when they saw sunlight. Alcatraz had been the fortress of the past, but ADX was the modern. Among its walls sat Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, the infamous cartel kingpin who once dug tunnels to freedom in Mexico. Here, his tunnels meant nothing. ADX had buried him in a concrete box. Then there was Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, whose bombs terrorized the country for nearly 2 decades. Zacarias Moussaoui, tied to 9/11, shouted his hatred from behind steel doors. Richard Reid, the shoe bomber, sat in silence, a reminder of how one man almost turned a plane into a coffin. ADX didn't just cage men, it caged legends. Life inside was crushing by design. Prisoners spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Their world was a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell with a bed, a desk, and a steel toilet. Meals arrived through a slot in the door. Exercise meant 1 hour in a small outdoor cage, alone, staring at the sky through mesh wire. Even visits from family happened behind thick glass, voices filtered through a phone. For many inmates, ADX was worse than death. It wasn't just about punishing them, it was about breaking them. And for years, the system claimed it worked. Until the figure appeared. When the alarms died down, whispers spread through the prison. Inmates banged on doors, taunting the guards. "You can't even control your cameras," one voice shouted. El Chapo leaned back on his bunk, smirking as if he already knew something the guards didn't. Ted Kaczynski scribbled faster in his notebook, lines of code and formulas filling pages. Moussaoui yelled louder, claiming it was proof America's fortress was nothing but lies. Richard Reid bowed his head in prayer. Each man reacted differently, but one truth united them, the idea that ADX Florence might not. The warden gathered his staff in the control room. Technicians from outside were brought in to analyze the feeds. Frame by frame, the figure appeared on the screen, pacing with calm precision. Then, suddenly, gone. The technicians found no glitches, no corrupted files. "There is no malfunction," one finally admitted. His words hung in the air like a sentence. If it wasn't the cameras, then it had to be real. Guards exchanged nervous glances. ADX Florence was built to prevent impossible things. And yet the impossible. To restore control, the warden ordered immediate lockdowns. Inmates were strip-searched. Cells were ripped apart. Shanks, drugs, and hidden notes were found, but nothing explained the figure. Officers searched El Chapo's letters, Kaczynski's notebooks, Moussaoui's prayer rug, anything that might suggest a plan. But the evidence pointed nowhere. Still, the sense of control was gone. Guards walked faster, radios buzzed with nervous chatter, and for the first time, ADX wasn't feared because it was escape-proof. It was feared because no one could explain what had just broken through its walls. A fortress only works if everyone believes. For Elijah Brooks, a young officer just 6 months into his assignment, the fear was personal. He had joined the Bureau of Prisons believing ADX was the ultimate line between chaos and order. Now, as he patrolled the silent tiers, he felt the weight of every shadow. Inmates pressed their faces to the slots of their doors, whispering his name, telling him he would be next. He tightened his grip on his baton, heart racing, knowing he was outnumbered hundreds to one. ADX was supposed to protect him. Instead, it felt like the walls were closing in around him. At night, silence fell heavy across the prison. Guards patrolled with rifles slung low, footsteps echoing against the concrete. Inmates lay on their bunks, staring at the ceiling, each man listening for the smallest sound. And then, just after midnight, the cameras flickered again. The figure was back. This time, it wasn't pacing the yard. It was walking the corridor outside the cells of the most infamous inmates. El Chapo, Moussaoui, Kaczynski, and Reid all leaned forward in silence, their eyes fixed on the slot in their doors. The guards rushed to the corridor, flashlights sweeping across the concrete. But the hall was empty. No doors open, no inmates missing. And yet, on the screens, the figure remained, moving slowly, deliberately, stopping outside El Chapo's cell last. Then it turned, its blurred face staring straight into the camera. For the first time, the guards weren't just watching the prison. The prison was watching them back. And as the feed cut to black, one truth settled over ADX Florence like a shadow. Even the control room was silent after the blackout. For 30 long seconds, every monitor showed only static. Guards leaned forward, hearts pounding, waiting for the image to return. When the screens flickered back on, the corridor was empty. The figure had vanished without opening a single door or triggering a single alarm. The warden clenched his fists, his jaw tight. ADX Florence wasn't supposed to make mistakes. Yet here they were, staring at the impossible. One question echoed among the staff. Had they just witnessed an intruder, a ghost? The warden ordered a prison-wide emergency sweep. Every inmate was accounted for, every door sealed, every lock secure. Still, whispers spread through the cell blocks like wildfire. Inmates banged on their doors, shouting, mocking the guards. "Your fortress is broken," one voice yelled. "Even your cameras lie." El Chapo smirked, his eyes gleaming with the kind of confidence that terrified officers. If the prison's invincibility was only an illusion, then its most infamous inmates had just been handed hope. Officer Elijah Brooks walked the tier with his partner, nerves raw. He felt every stare through the slots of the steel doors, as if the inmates could sense his fear. "Don't look weak," his partner whispered. But Elijah couldn't help it. He remembered the blurred face turning toward the camera, the way it seemed to look back at him personally. He had signed up for ADX believing he would guard men who could never escape. But now he wasn't sure who was guarding who. At night, even in his own apartment off base, he kept the lights on. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Prisons sent federal investigators to review the incident. They combed through hours of footage, inspecting servers, wiring, and the backup generators that powered the cameras. Nothing was broken, nothing was hacked, nothing was tampered with. "It's clean," one investigator said flatly. The warden demanded answers, but none came. The figure had appeared on multiple angles, moving through corridors it could not have accessed. "If this is a glitch," another investigator admitted quietly, "it's the most human glitch I've ever seen." The inmates began to weave their own theories. Moussaoui shouted through his slot that the figure was divine punishment, proof that America's stronghold would crumble. Richard Reid whispered to anyone who would listen that the figure was a messenger, a promise of freedom. Ted Kaczynski didn't say a word, but he wrote furiously in his notebooks, as if trying to map out the figure's path into numbers and equations. El Chapo, however, remained calm, leaning against the wall with a smile. He said nothing, but to the guards, his silence was more terrifying than Moussaoui. Days turned into nights, and still the figure returned. Sometimes it appeared on camera for seconds, other times for minutes. It walked the same corridors, pacing calmly, pausing at cells of the most infamous inmates. Each time, guards rushed to the location. Each time, they found nothing. Doors locked, bolts sealed, sensors untouched. The warden increased patrols, but the more he tightened security, the more often the figure appeared. ADX Florence was designed to crush chaos. The guards began to fracture under the weight. Some refused to work night shifts, claiming the cameras weren't just faulty but cursed. Others whispered about conspiracies, rogue staff members, outside interference, maybe even a government experiment gone wrong. Elijah Brooks found himself caught between duty and fear. He wanted to believe in the system, but the figure's blurred face haunted him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it turning toward the lens, staring. He wondered if the prison was testing them, breaking. Then came the night the figure changed its routine. Instead of walking the corridors, it stopped directly in front of the central control camera. Guards froze as its blurred face leaned closer to the lens. The static distorted the image, but one thing was clear. Its hand lifted slowly, pressing against the glass as though reaching out to touch them. A chill ran through the room. One guard swore he saw letters scrawled across the static, a word forming, "Open." The screen blinked, cut to black, and when it returned, by morning, staff morale had collapsed. Guards argued openly in the break room, some demanding to quit, others calling for military intervention. The warden tried to restore order, insisting it was a technical fault, but his voice lacked conviction. The inmates could smell weakness. They began chanting in unison during lockdown, their voices echoing through the tiers. "Open the gates! Open the gates!" What had started as whispers had now become defiance. ADX Florence's greatest weapon, fear, was slipping away. That night, the figure appeared again, but this time, it didn't vanish. On the monitors, it walked slowly down the tier, stopping at El Chapo's cell. Guards sprinted to the corridor, hearts racing, guns drawn. When they arrived, the lights flickered overhead. The camera feed showed the figure turning its blurred face toward the officers standing just feet away. Yet in the corridor itself, nothing was there. El Chapo leaned forward, his smirk sharper than ever. "You see it too," he whispered through the slot. ADX, Florence was built to be unbreakable. Its walls were engineered to silence chaos, its routines designed to strip men of power, its very existence a warning that some criminals would never see freedom again. For years it lived up to that legend, until the cameras revealed something the prison could not control. The blurred figure that walked its corridors wasn't just a mystery. It was a crack in the fortress. Guards lost faith, inmates gained hope, and for men like El Chapo, Ted Kaczynski, next part will take you even deeper inside ADX Florence, exposing darker secrets, untold stories of infamous inmates, and the chilling possibility that America's strongest prison is cracking from within. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.